Thanks for joining me today as we create some flat cards. And I have so many issues that we'll have to fix, but I'll enjoy having you watch me fix them because there is a fix for every error. First, I'm going to use a bunch of stencils today because I think stencils give the illusion of some dimension when there isn't dimension there. I'm going to secure this down to my mat with some Post-it tape. If you've never used it, it's actually pretty good, very inexpensive. I'll use it for things like this. It's just Post-it brand. And then I take a couple finger daubers and some Distress Oxide. I'm using two fairly close colors, Candied Apple and Abandoned Coral. I'm going to start with the Abandoned Coral and very lightly go over the entire stencil. And you'll see it's just a very light, kind of orangish, reddish color. Coral, I guess. First, I'm going to take the stencil off and slightly adjust it so that there's kind of a little bit of a shadow of the lighter color, and then we're going to add this darker Candied Apple red to it. So again, fairly light version of it, but I'm going to fill in all the areas. And again, this just gives an illusion of dimension when you don't have the ability to add matting or foam tape or any type of embellishments onto your cards. I want these cards to be completely flat because they are for a project for Mother's Day. And so I would like to make a bunch of flat cards. So that kind of looks kind of crazy and I like it, whatever it is. Next, I'm using a stencil that has just greenery. Again, I'm going to use the same tape. I love that about tape when you can reuse your supplies. And I post-it tape it down, and then I'm going to use two Stampin' Up! Stamp pads. These are Old Olive and Garden Green. I'm going to start with the lighter of the two, which is the Old Olive. And I'm just going to lightly stamp lightly ink dauber all of it with this olive color. It's the lighter of the two. And I'm not too concerned if it's super heavy or not, but then with the second darker color, I go in and I just do like the bottom half or the top half or a very small amount of each of the leaves. It's hard to tell. I'm closing in so you guys can see it a little more close up, but I'm just trying to get like half of the leaf or part of the leaf. So with the big reveal, I moved the stencil, but I think that looks really cool. So we'll put that to the side and we'll come back to that later on, but I like the way that looks. Alright, another stencil for this one. I love these mosaic looking stencils. I decide on this one, and again we're going to make sure that we tape it down so that the stencil doesn't move while you're working on it. That's what I'm just trying to get as much of the stencil on the card as I can, and I use 3 Stampin' Up! Stamp pads. These are Highland Heather is the purple, Balmy Blue is the blue, and Flirty Flamingo is the pink. And for this I'm going to use some blending brushes just so you guys can see what the difference is. And I'm just going to lightly go over kind of 1/3 of this stencil. And then I'm going to use the blue for kind of the middle section. Again, Balmy Blue. This doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to go with the last color, which is the Flirty Flamingo. And I really like these 3 colors together. I love the Stampin' Up! Stamp pads anyway, but these 3 colors are probably 3 of my favorite. And so for the big reveal here, you're going to see I made a big error in the top left corner. I think that maybe I can try and make like add some additional stenciling, but I change my mind and I say, we'll come back to that and I'll fix it later. Sometimes I need to put things to the side so I can decide what I want to do. Now I'm going to use some Masking Magic strips. And we're going to make this card again look like it's got some matting to it by dividing the card. And I'm using the grid on my cutting mat here so that I can get these masking strips to be all equal. And then I'm also going to put them on the outside edges. Again, it'll look like there's a white mat by doing this process. And then I'm just gonna snip off a few of these with my sticky scissors. I use these for anything that are sticky, and I have a little note on the scissors so I don't forget to use those. And then I just use the snipped off pieces so I can just save as much of this Masking Magic tape. It's a little bit pricier for me, so then I'm going to just use some copy paper to kind of keep half of it covered while I work on the other half. And I'm going to use my blending brush. This doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not using this to be super pretty blended. Those of you that have watched my videos before, I'm not a super great blender. I don't really have the patience to be a great blender. And so I just need a little bit of color on each quadrant. And so that's all I'm trying to do here. And I'm trying to make it a little bit darker on the outside edges and a little bit lighter on the inside because I'm going to be doing some stamping as well. So I just need there to be no white showing is basically it. I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite corner. So mask it all off again. I used Post-it notes. You just use what you have. So I'm going to use the same color and do that opposite corner. Again, trying to be a little bit darker on the outside corners, a little bit lighter on the inside. And there we go. Then I'm going to use this kind of geometric shaped kind of stamp set. And it's got some ink splatter looking stamps. And I'm going to use those with the same color ink, so monochromatic stamping, but it's going to be much darker because I'm going to use it full strength. And just some messy splatters on there. On the opposite corner, I'm going to use some different stamps. I'm going to use those hollow splatters. I think they're more like droplets. And I'm going to put these on one acrylic block versus on two. And just because I was afraid they might be bigger than the shape, I put a mask there, but so a little different, but same kind of messy look. And then I'm going to go in with the purple, which is the Highland Heather again. And I'm going to use those blending brushes and do the same thing on the two opposing corners. Again, I'm trying to get a lot of ink on the outside and a lot less ink on the inside. This one looks like it's got a ton of ink on it, but I promise once we use the stamps, you'll see it came out just fine. Alright, we're going to mask this off and do the final corner. I'm trying to speed this up. And I cut out a little bit of it just because you guys get the whole point with how to ink this up. And then again, I will stamp this with the paint splatter looking ones. Almost look like handprints a little bit. Actually put a third one in there just for good measure, so they look a little bit different. And I'll ink up the last one with the droplets. And then we'll see what that looks like. This looks kind of cool. And then obviously I decided to change that up a little bit, and I'm going to do the opposite stamp in a Versamark clear pad, and then I'm going to heat emboss that with some clear embossing powder. And that's just going to kind of give it that third layer, so it's going to be a little bit lighter, a little bit shinier, and it's just going to have, again, that illusion of some dimension, even though that's going to keep it nice and flat. So this is just my Versamark clear ink pad, and then I'm going to put some clear embossing powder from Stampin' Up. Shake that around, make sure you got it on there, and then you're going to see a major issue here. So I used all that ink, and I didn't use my little cornstarch bag before I started, and so I have to actually spend quite a bit of time, and luckily I did most of it off camera, but I did have to wipe off just a significant amount with a paintbrush. I use this Farberware pan for all of my heat embossing, and what that does for me is it allows I think it just heats the bottom of it because it's metal, and then my paper never warps anymore. I used to have lots of problems with paper warping, and I never have paper warping anymore. So here's the big reveal when you take those little masking strips off, and I think that came out really cute. Alright, so next we're going to take a couple of these circles, and this is just something I tried earlier when I had used some of the excess ink. I just made like a little watercolor with it. So I might use it later, so I decided to use a little bit of a decorative circle, and there's another circle on the outside of it, and that will just help us get a circle cut out that will almost use like a stencil. And so this is going to be kind of our stencil. This is harder because the stencil itself is a little bit bigger than the card, so I'll flip the card over and make sure that I have it lined up properly. And then I'm going back to my Distress Oxides. This is Salty Ocean, and Twisted Citron is the kind of greenish yellow color. And I am going to start with the Twisted Citron, and we're going to make what will end up being grassy, mountainous area. And you'll see what I mean in a few minutes. But this, again, I'm just trying to get half of this circle covered with this citron color. I'm not really too worried about darker or lighter areas, just don't want any white. Then with the Salty Ocean, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that on the top, which is actually looking like the bottom right now, but it is actually the top. And again, I'm not too concerned about how much is being covered, just trying to get rid of any white area, because you'll see I use some additional stencils here in just a second. So I'm going to use this neat little stencil that I have that has clouds and sun and mountains and things like that, and I'm going to put some clouds onto this blue area. Again, the same color, I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. So I'm using the blending brushes here and just adding a little bit of clouds to the blue area. I like how that came out. And I'm also going to do some stamping with a sun, and can't tell, but that's a pumpkin pie Stampin' Up stamp pad, and then I'm also using now the crushed curry Stampin' Up stamp pad, which is a yellowish color. And here's my third error. I didn't do a very good job with the stencils, so I kind of start over again, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to fix that, so I'll just do it all over again. So I've sped through this because you've already seen this once, but I do it all over again. I'd even cleaned up and everything. So. But it was too big of an error, too much ink, and I didn't think I was going to be able to fix it easily. So decided to just start over again. And again, speeding through this so you don't have to sit through too much of it twice. Alright, and now I realize that the card opens the wrong way. Because I flipped it over when the card was going the wrong way, but I decided to keep going anyway because I was just so frustrated already. And this is where I add the kind of the land part of the second half of this. And I'm trying to make sure I covered everything up. Since I've obviously already had issues, I do the clouds again. I actually used the wrong brush for a second there. And then I haven't realized it yet, but I have another issue. But I'm putting in more land here, and again, I'm getting outside of the... Here's my issue. I made the same mistake twice, and so I'm going to use a couple of birds so it doesn't look like, it almost looks like that orange is just a reflection. So here are my card fronts. So far, they're actually the card bases as well because they're a flat card. And I'm going to try and pick out some sentiments. So this one's kind of fancy, so I pick out some fantasy script for this card. I really like that mosaic looking one. I use my Hero Art Unicorn White pigment ink pad because I'm going to emboss this. It's his birthday wishes. So I'm going to use my little stamp press tool and push that down. And then I'm going to get some embossing powder. This is Lindy's embossing powder. It's called Purple. Rock Purple. And I'm going to use my heat gun again. And here's my next error. The embossing powder is way too light. So it's hard to see, but I put it to the side and I'll deal with it later. So now I've taken out some sentiment strips for my purple and teal kind of looking card, and this just says Happy Day, and I just use my long Tim Holtz scissors to cut that out. You can also use a paper cutter if you prefer. I always prefer to use my scissors if I can handle it. And then I just cut the edges with my little punch, and then I just put a little bit of the ink that was on that finger dauber already, and just to give it again that illusion of dimension. I'll use my Burley Art precision glue and just glue that into the center. So this is technically not flat, but it's a very small piece of paper. It will not cause any issue when they're mailing this card. So again, you can see a little bit of that shimmer. Here I'm going to use a sticker. It's some gold stickers that I have, and it says God understands our prayers. And I just thought it was kind of a nice sentiment for that card. I really liked the way that card turned out, even with my errors. Here's my super busy card. I'm going to use a happy birthday sentiment on here. I'm going to use my Memento black ink. It's my favorite black ink for any kind of stamp because it just has a lot of detail. I do stamp it several times just because I want it to be nice and rich and black on there. And that is the beauty of a stamp positioner, is you can do this over and over and over again. Alright, so there's that. And then next we're going to work on this greenery card, and I'm going to take out all these clear stickers I have. And, you know, am I going to use flowers? Am I going to use butterflies? If I use butterflies, I have so many different colors. Which ones should we do? If I've got some pastel ones. I've got some jade and purple ones. Decided not on the pastel ones. I think I have a coordinating one with one of these, so if I can find that one, I'll use that. Oh, there it is. So we have a side butterfly and kind of a front-on butterfly. So I kind of play around with where I'm going to want those so that I can choose where then I want a sentiment to go. So put the sentiment lower down and put the 2 butterflies higher up. Use my stamp positioner again. And this time I'm going to use my VersaFine black ink because I'm going to emboss this. This one just says happy birthday. It's kind of a thinner one. Again, I inked that up a couple times. And then this time I'm using a Cleopatra Copper Lindy's embossing powder. It's just going to give it a little bit of shimmer. And because the butterflies had some orange in their wings, I thought this would be a pretty shimmer on top of that black. Again, I did not use my cornstarch bag, but luckily it didn't have a lot to adhere to. So, and again, that just kind of gave it a little bit of shimmer that you can really just see in the light, but it's primarily black. Then to put these butterflies on, they're stickers, so I just literally have to peel off the sticker part and then put their little legs where I want them on the stems. And these butterflies are so pretty in person. The camera doesn't really give them any justice. They're absolutely gorgeous. And it went over just a little bit on the tip, so I cut that off. And that card is pretty much done. For this one, I decided to pretend like there's a mat. And one way that you can do that is with some masking tape. So I use my Post-it masking tape again. I don't know why I decided to do all 4 sides because that's really not going to work because it's going to cover some of it. But at least I have the 4 pieces of tape. So I open it up so I don't get any on the inside of the card, and I take just a black marker. If you have a permanent marker, that works really well as well. This is just a black alcohol marker, and that's when I realized I don't really need all these strips because you can only really do one at a time. So then I do the next side, and then this third side I didn't do a very good job of. As you can tell, I don't really push that tape down very well, and so as a result you're going to see that when I pull this off I didn't seal the tape, and so it kind of crept underneath it, which is going to cause me to then have to fix this by making it a larger kind of matte look. And then if I have to do it on one side, you get it, I've got to do it on all the sides again. So speeding through this so that you guys don't have to watch it a million times, but I did have to make that black marker look a lot thicker than I had intended. But I think it still looks pretty good. And the only problem here is that I did get some on the inside of the card, so I'm going to have to do some cutting so that, and it didn't quite work, so I'm going to have to do some more cutting, and so guess what that means? Yep, I've got to redo that ink again because, and those were just my dual-tipped markers, alcohol markers. So that one is almost done. I decided to add even more dimension, or the illusion of a dimension, to this flat card, but with some Winkostella. And I put way too much, but I ended up using it all, so it's fine. But this looks so gorgeous, and the camera really doesn't do it any justice. Those of you that love Winkostella like I do, it just adds so much. And you can just see here that I kind of go crazy with it. I love it, so I'm putting it on almost every single one, because the more dimension we can have, the better off we are when we have these flat cards. And I'm doing these flat cards for a Mother's Day present, so stay tuned next week and you'll see that gift that involves having some of these cards. So that's all that little shine. I end up using the Winkostella because I had so much, a little bit on that sun to give it a little bit of sparkle, since I had a gold sentiment, and then I put a little bit on the leaves as well, just a few of them, just again to add a little bit of shimmer. Then I take out a white pen and I just add what would be normally like little embellishments with the illusion of embellishments. So just some white dots all over this card just to give it a little bit something. Needs a little something something, right? White pen. I really like white pen. I use it quite a bit to sometimes just shade and shadow and whatever, so I think that turned out kind of cute. Alright, so I'm going back through my cards. Everything's looking good until... oh, another error. Look at the bottom. There's just like a little bit of that went over again, that stencil probably. This is going to be a quick fix, and luckily I still had out that blending brush, and I'm just going to use the leftover ink from that blending brush, and we're just going to make it look like we did that on purpose. Alright, and that's the card that opens the wrong way. Later on I do matte that on a piece of blue cardstock, and it turns out just fine. Back to this one, we do need to fix this one still so that you can't read that sentiment whatsoever. Also, I've got that purple ink that kind of showed up there on the side, so we're just gonna whack off some corners and change the entire shape of the card. I actually really like it though, as it turns out. And then I just take a purple pen and I decide I'm gonna go along the outline of, because I used embossing powder, you can tell where the outside edge is, so I just use the pen and I outline it where I need to outline it, and it makes it much more readable. What do you think? And then, because I can't leave anything alone, I decide to add a little bit of purple to the edge of the card. Again, just trying to give a little bit of that illusion of dimension to a flat card. And I actually think it turns out really cute with that. And I'm not trying to be super perfect. Cards are supposed to be pretty and a little messy, and this one I decide it needs a little something. I don't like how square it is, so I just do a corner rounder punch. I'm not always very good at these. I tend to cut them too short or whatever, and I do that in one side here. I think it's this side, but then I fix it, so I think that just looks a little bit nicer. I like when sometimes you corner round. Alright, so there they all are. I think they actually turned out pretty good considering we had as many errors as we had. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please tune in the next week when I show you the Mother's Day present that this is going to go with. I really enjoyed stamping and crafting with you today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you found this content useful and entertaining, please click the like button. Also subscribe, as I create content for my channel twice weekly, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then.